There is a moment in every life when you begin to realize that explanations don't free you, they trap you. You explain yourself to calm others, to be understood, to appear kind. Yet every word becomes a thread that others pull until nothing of your mystery remains. You think you're creating clarity, but you're only feeding curiosity. You think you're building trust, but you're handing over power. Machiavelli understood this with cold precision. He observed that the more a man explains, the more he invites judgment. Every justification opens a new door for attack. The wise, therefore, say little, not because they lack reasons, but because they understand that power depends on perception, not persuasion. The prince who explains himself becomes a servant to the opinions of others. The one who stays silent lets imagination defend him. In a world obsessed with transparency, silence has become rebellion. People demand access to your thoughts, your motives, your emotions, as if your worth depends on their comprehension. They will pressure you with questions disguised as concern, curiosity disguised as intimacy, morality disguised as control. Why did you do this? What did you mean by that? Are you sure you're not hiding something? You will feel the pull to respond, to correct, to justify. But every answer tightens the leash. There is a reason the powerful remain vague. Their vagueness is not ignorance, it is armor. When people cannot read your intentions, they project their own. They turn their uncertainty into myth, their assumptions into awe. Machiavelli called this the economy of appearance, the idea that the image of virtue often outweighs virtue itself. To seem confident is to be treated as confident. To seem wise is to be obeyed as wise. The moment you begin explaining, the illusion collapses. You move from being the author of perception to its prisoner. Think of the most commanding leaders in history, the emperors, generals, revolutionaries, and even the quiet CEOs of modern power. They spoke rarely, but when they did, their words felt like decrees. Their silence between sentences created the illusion of infinite thought. People didn't wait for their explanations. They waited for their approval. That is the essence of authority. Not louder conviction, but quieter gravity. You, too, have felt the weight of this lesson, though you might not have recognized it. Perhaps in an argument where your reasoning was flawless, yet you still lost control. Perhaps when you tried to prove your innocence, only to find your defense deepening suspicion. Or when you opened your heart to be understood and ended up misunderstood. Each time, you walked away emptier, wondering why truth wasn't enough. The answer lies in Machiavelli's world. The truth has no power without control of its presentation. Explaining yourself is an emotional reflex, the mind's way of begging for peace. You want to be seen correctly, so you give away your inner architecture. You reveal the motives behind your choices, the fears behind your mistakes, the logic behind your ambition. But in doing so, you surrender the most valuable currency of all, interpretation. Power lives in the gap between what you know and what others think they know. The moment you close that gap, you lose your advantage. Machiavelli wrote, "It is not necessary for a prince to have all the virtuous qualities, but it is very necessary to appear to have them." He meant that people don't follow reality, they follow perception, and perception thrives on mystery. Authority is built not on complete understanding, but on partial revelation. The mind fills in what the eyes cannot see, and in that imagination lies respect. Imagine entering a room where everyone tries to prove themselves. Loud voices, endless arguments, desperate displays of intellect. In that chaos, the one who remains composed, who speaks slowly and only when required, becomes the center of gravity. People start adjusting to his rhythm. They lean closer to catch his words. His silence makes others insecure. His restraint makes them curious. That's how power begins, not through domination but through controlled invisibility. To never explain yourself does not mean to never communicate. It means to speak with purpose, not panic. It means to understand that explanations rarely convince those who doubt you. They only comfort those who already believe. When you defend yourself, you tell the world that its opinion still governs your peace. But when you remain silent, you declare sovereignty over your own narrative. Machiavelli lived in a world of spies and shifting alliances, where survival depended on mastering ambiguity. The prince, he said, must know how to act against faith, against charity, even against humanity when necessary. He must adapt not to morality, but to necessity. The same principle applies to authority today. You must know when transparency is a virtue and when it is suicide. The truth is not always your ally. Sometimes it needs a disguise. Honesty is admirable, but timing decides whether it becomes a strength or a wound. The world is not a courtroom, it is a theater. Those who insist on proving their honesty are playing the wrong script. The wise know that credibility is built not through explanation, but through consistency. Let your results, your composure, and your patience become your defense. Words fade, patterns endure. You must learn the discipline of silence, the courage to let others misunderstand you, because being misunderstood is painful, but being predictable is fatal. Every time you rush to clarify, you reveal where your insecurity lives. Every time you explain your worth, you imply that it's negotiable. Every time you justify your choices, you give strangers permission to question them again. The art of authority begins with restraint. Restraint from oversharing, from over-apologizing, from narrating your own story to those who haven't earned the right to hear it. Authority demands distance, not arrogance, but structure. You can be kind and still unreadable. You can be generous and still guarded. You can lead and still remain beyond full comprehension. In fact, that distance is what makes people respect you. When people cannot measure you, they imagine you to be larger. When they cannot predict you, they prepare for you. And when they cannot explain you, they obey you. That is the silent mathematics of power. Machiavelli's law was simple yet cruel. To command others, you must first command perception. To command perception, you must control revelation. And revelation begins the moment you open your mouth. Most rulers lose their thrones not by what they do, but by what they reveal. So when they question you, "Why did you do this?" smile and say nothing. When they provoke you, "Aren't you afraid?" Look at them until the silence burns. When they misunderstand you, let them, because the longer they wonder, the more they respect. In the next part, we'll go deeper into Machiavelli's law, how silence and selectivity not only preserve power, but expand it. How authority is a game of patience, and how the absence of explanation becomes the ultimate sign of control. Because the moment you stop explaining, the world starts explaining you. There comes a point in your evolution when silence stops being defense and becomes design. At first, you stay quiet to avoid conflict, to protect peace, to keep from being misunderstood. But eventually, the silence itself becomes your language. It begins to carry meaning far beyond what words could express. It becomes a declaration that you no longer negotiate your truth through explanation. It becomes evidence of maturity, the proof that you no longer chase the approval of those who haven't earned your transparency. This is the moment Machiavelli would call the birth of the prince within, not a literal ruler, but the mind that governs its own world, calm, disciplined, strategic. Such a person does not explain themselves because they no longer need to be understood to act. They no longer trade energy for validation. Their decisions, even when questioned, are no longer weakened by the need to justify them. Their presence alone becomes justification enough. You can feel the shift when it happens. There's a new weight in your stillness, a quiet confidence that unsettles people who once dismissed you. They sense something has changed, not your tone, but your boundaries. You no longer rush to fill silence. You no longer soften your edges to appear kind. You simply watch, listen, and decide. That restraint unsettles them, because it removes the power they once had over your reactions. Machiavelli warned that power is not only in action, but in the control of reaction. He understood that the one who cannot be provoked cannot be conquered. When you no longer explain yourself, you become unpredictable. That unpredictability is magnetic and intimidating. People begin to wonder what you're thinking, how much you know, what you might do next. Their curiosity becomes your influence. Their assumptions become your armor. Because when others fill the silence with their own interpretations, you gain the advantage of invisibility. You can be anything in their imagination, and often what they imagine is far more powerful than anything you could have said. This is the essence of Machiavelli's psychology: appear but never expose. He wrote that a ruler must seem compassionate, faithful, humane, and honest, but only seem. He should be willing to act against all those virtues when necessity demands it, not because deception is noble, but because the human heart is fickle. People love as long as they feel safe. They obey as long as they feel impressed. Therefore, control of image matters more than the sincerity of confession. Explanation dilutes image. You may resist this. You may say, "But I want to be authentic." Understand this. Authenticity is not transparency. Authenticity is integrity of purpose. Transparency is the mistake of exposing every detail of that purpose to those who do not deserve it. Machiavelli would remind you that truth must be strategic. The wise reveal only what strengthens their position, never what satisfies curiosity. Imagine, for a moment, you are a leader, not of a country, but of your own destiny. Every conversation is diplomacy. Every disclosure is a treaty. Every reaction is a signal to potential allies and adversaries alike. Would you sign every document without reading it? Would you hand over your plans to strangers? That's what happens every time you explain yourself to those who haven't earned your confidence. You give them a map of your vulnerabilities disguised as sincerity. The new world tells you that openness is strength. It preaches authenticity as exposure, vulnerability as virtue. And while that sounds beautiful, Machiavelli would warn that such ideals only work in paradise, not in courts, not in politics, not in business, not in life. You are surrounded by human nature, envy, competition, desire. To navigate it, you must protect your intention behind a wall of calm opacity. That wall is not deceit, it's sovereignty. The mature mind learns to be kind without being accessible, to be admired without being transparent, to be loved without being consumed. It learns that not all questions deserve answers, not all attacks deserve rebuttals, and not all relationships deserve explanations. When you reach that understanding, you begin to experience a rare kind of freedom, the freedom of being fully known only to yourself. Machiavelli's law, never explain yourself, is not arrogance. It's self-respect. It's the understanding that explanation is often a plea for permission, and permission, in the hierarchy of power, is a weakness. You do not need to be right in everyone's eyes. You only need to be clear in your own. Still, this principle requires a certain refinement of presence. You cannot simply go silent and expect to be respected. Silence without strength appears as avoidance. Silence without dignity feels like guilt. What gives silence its power is conviction, the unshakable certainty that you owe no one access to your reasoning. Machiavelli believed that composure is communication, stillness is statement. Your calm must feel intentional, not accidental. This is why he wrote that a ruler should always appear decisive even when uncertain, confident even when calculating. The public must never see you hesitate, because once they see doubt, they sense vulnerability. Once they sense vulnerability, they test it. Authority, like glass, cracks not from the blow itself, but from the small fractures of uncertainty that precede it. Never let them see those fractures. You must also understand the subtle psychology behind explaining yourself. It is often an attempt to control how others perceive you, but perception cannot be controlled directly. It can only be influenced, and influence thrives on suggestion, not instruction. When you explain too much, you strip others of the opportunity to imagine your depth. When you say less, they project their own meanings onto you. And often, those meanings serve your purpose better than the truth would have. Think of great artists, philosophers and leaders. Their ambiguity keeps them alive in people's minds long after they're gone. We debate what they meant, what they intended, what they felt, because they never fully told us. Mystery is endurance. Explanation is decay. The moment you define yourself completely, you close the door on curiosity. And curiosity, Machiavelli would remind you, is the currency of influence. Authority requires a careful balance between presence and distance. If you are too visible, you become ordinary. If you are too hidden, you become irrelevant. The key is controlled scarcity, appearing rarely, speaking rarely, but with precision when you do. That's why powerful people value pauses. Pauses make every word feel deliberate, every movement intentional. Silence between words acts as punctuation for dominance. And there's another truth Machiavelli would whisper. Those who constantly demand explanations are not seeking understanding. They're seeking control. The person who asks, "Why didn't you answer?" wants compliance, not clarity. The person who says, "Explain yourself," wants reassurance, not truth. By refusing to explain, you expose their dependence. You reveal who truly needs whom. And in that reversal, the balance of power shifts silently to you. To live by this law requires strength of solitude. You must be able to stand in misunderstanding without shaking. You must let others invent stories about you and resist the urge to edit them. You must accept that the price of authority is the discomfort of being misjudged. But in that discomfort lies liberation. When you stop depending on the world's understanding, you start mastering it. The transformation is subtle but irreversible. You move from seeking respect to embodying it. You no longer crave to be seen as right. You become right in your own rhythm. Your silence starts to feel like gravity. People feel it even when you're not there. You've become what Machiavelli described as the unapproachable presence, the person who holds power not through volume, but through inevitability. And here's the secret. Machiavelli left between his lines. Authority is not about domination. It's about energy. The calmest person in the room always holds the highest frequency. The one who listens longest, who reacts last, who explains least, commands the tempo of every conversation. To control the rhythm is to control the outcome. So stop rushing to prove yourself. Stop feeding the world your explanations. You owe no one the story of your soul. Speak only when silence no longer serves you. Act only when stillness no longer protects you. Because when you live this way, people stop questioning your motives. They begin to question their own. That is Machiavelli's final law of authority, the power to reverse perception, to turn curiosity into caution, to turn misunderstanding into mystique. Never explain yourself. Let others reveal themselves trying to understand you. If this message resonates, then you already sense what he meant when he said that men judge by appearances. You can now choose which appearance to give them, or none at all. Tell me, then, in the quiet corners of your mind, are you ready to live without needing to be understood? If so, comment below, "I owe no explanations." And subscribe, not for noise, but for wisdom that lives between words. Because the highest authority is not the one who speaks the most. It's the one who no longer needs to